Hello, Russell.
Hi, Cherie. How are you?
I am good. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. How's everything?
Everything is good. So we'll get started in a few minutes. I'm actually gonna set us up to go live in our members only Facebook group too. So just give me
Okay,
2
sure.
minutes to do that. Okay, so we should be live in there too. And then I'm just gonna open it up on my cell phone so I'm able to see if any comments come from there. And then we're
Okay.
gonna get started with the conversation. And we have a couple of people joining us now. Don't forget to put your city and state in the chat so we can recognize you, everybody. Welcome. We have a special guest, good friend of mine coming here today to talk about um, buying and selling businesses. So we got West Palm Beach, Florida in the house. We got California in the house. Hey, Jackie, how you doing today? So I'm sure we're gonna have more people coming in. We're just going to hop right in and get started. We are also live streaming on Facebook as well within our members group. Today's topic is so important whether you are a business owner, you want to be a business owner, or you are considering investing in someone else's business who says, hey, we want to buy a business in order to either expand or to not start from scratch. So probably about 7, 8 years ago. Do you know Johannes, Russell? You know
Yes,
Johannes?
I do.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
I remember him
So,
well.
yeah, so we both have a friend named Johannes in the Northern Virginia area, and he wanted to expand his cleaning company. He had a commercial cleaning company. So he ended up buying another commercial cleaning company, and automatically, pretty much overnight, I think he tripled his business like pretty much overnight. So if there's strategy with regards to buying a business for growth or buying a business so it's already cash flowing, so you don't have to start from zero. Some people also decide to buy businesses instead of starting them from scratch because it's easier to get bank loans. I'll be honest with you, it's easier to get bank loans that I've seen from my clients for an existing business than it is from a brand new business or for a brand new business. And then finally, some of you need to really consider what you're going to do in the next 10 years when you want to sell your business. Your business can be your greatest asset. It can set you up for retirement. So I, contacted Russell. He's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for close to a decade now, and he has helped a lot of businesses, a lot of people both buy and sell businesses. He also has a program with regards to how people can buy businesses and sell businesses as well, but we want to do a nice overview tonight today. So give a virtual hand clap for Russell Logan here. Great friend of mine. Welcome.
Thank you, Cherie. What an introduction. I
Yeah.
just hope I can provide some information to your audience that will be helpful for them as they go about trying to buy or sell businesses.
Well, I'm sure that you will. So let's start from the beginning. You are a mergers and acquisitions expert. You also, are you still currently a business broker, or I know you were?
Yes.
You're still okay. So explain to everybody what that means.
Sure.
What does mergers and
Yeah.
acquisition mean? What's a business broker? All of that, and also tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay, sure. So first of all, The firm that I currently work with is called Sugar Business Advisors. Sugar is an acronym. We take a life cycle approach to working with businesses. So the SU is for startup, G is for growth, A is for acquire, E is for exit, and R is for retire. So that's where I am currently now. And we do, as Cherie pointed out, mostly mid-market, small business mergers and acquisitions work. And that's typically companies that would have a valuation of at least $2.5 million up to $50 million. So let me back up a little bit first, though. Um, my career started when I graduated from graduate business school and went into management consulting. I worked for a couple of the large accounting firms that had strategy consulting practices. The work that I tended to do early in my career with those firms was related to a lot of financial modeling, spreadsheet modeling to value the businesses, the clients that we were working with. And these were Fortune 500 companies. I had an affinity for that type of work, for the modeling and for the valuation. So I quickly became the go-to person at the firm for that type of work when we were doing those projects. So I did more or less that same type of work for about 10 to 12 years and decided I was tired of the consulting grind and went and worked in a corporate environment. And in that corporate environment, I had the opportunity to work with a team of folks who was presented with an opportunity to buy our business unit from CSX Corp, the railroad company. So myself and my colleagues self-funded, bootstrapped a buyout, and we bought that business unit. We ran it successfully for a number of years. I had an opportunity to do some other things, so I sold my interests to my partners at the time. Anyway, after doing so much of the different pieces of the transaction world, I decided that I would hang out my own shingle and get into small market business brokerage and mergers and acquisitions. So I initially started with a national branded firm, much like you would think about residential real estate, like a Century 21 or a Weichert or an ERA Realty company. There are branded business brokerage companies out there as well too. So I joined one, bought actually the rights, the marketing rights, the franchise rights to the Northern Virginia, DC area for a company called Murphy Business Brokers. I worked with them as a branded broker for about 10 years. And when my renewal came up to renew with Murphy, I had learned so much till I felt like I could do it myself. So I hung out my shingle for Sugar, and that's where we are today. So that's quickly my background, a little definition, as Cherie pointed out. So mergers and acquisitions and business brokerage are really just two different words for pretty much the same thing. With mergers and acquisitions, I help mostly companies on the sell side, that's business owners, when they're ready to sell. I help them manage the process of running a sale for their business so they can continue to operate their business without being mired down in the details of selling the business. And on the buy side, I work with buyers who are looking to make an acquisition. Business brokerage tends to refer to transactions that are smaller than $2 million or so in equity value or business value. And as a business broker, you can either work for a buyer or seller, or as merely a transaction broker. So say Cherie has a business that she's interested in buying and doesn't know exactly what it is she wants to buy. And I happen to know of a half dozen businesses that are currently on the market. And I simply can bring that list of businesses to Cherie without a lot of value added. If she picks one of those businesses to buy, I'm functioning as a transaction broker. I'm not really working for her. I'm not being paid by her in any kind of formal retainer manner, nor is the seller necessarily paying me in a retainer manner. They're just purely paying me, either the buyer or seller, to put the transaction together. So that's really just one subtlety of what a business broker is, as opposed to an M&A professional. It's about the same thing. I'm going to stop
Yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah, no, that's no problem. I was writing it down, a whole bunch of questions as you were talking. So um, let's start off with talking about um, the current environment that we're in economically. You know, the pandemic has shaken things up. Things were already expected to be shaken up even before the pandemic. So if anybody was listening to economic news back in 2019, people were saying even at that point that a recession is coming, and beware and get your assets together and get ready. I'm wondering what kind of opportunities, buying opportunities, are people seeing now, and what kind of businesses are, you know, primed to be sold in this COVID era?
Boy, okay, that's a good one, and that's a broad topic. But let
Mhm.
me approach it from a couple of different ways.
Okay.
First, if you have a valuable business, there's always going to be buyers out there who are looking for good, well-run businesses that are generating cash flow, that don't require the owner to be there every day, every moment. In other words, it's a sustainable business that exists without the owner having to be the business. And we can get into that a bit more. So there's always a market for those businesses. And typically, there's more buyers for those type of businesses than sellers. And so as a result, the multiple of the valuations for those types of businesses tend to be fairly resilient and strong. And that exists today. So if you've got a good business that is not down so much in this market, you still can sell. And businesses that have tended to, that are seeming to do pretty well, are really kind of, all over the map, to be quite honest. So obviously, businesses that are in the on the personal sanitation space, whether you are selling, PPE equipment or masks, or you have a service that goes into businesses and disinfects and cleans, those businesses are doing well. If you've got a restaurant, well, depending on your type of restaurant, you may or may not be doing so well. So if your business model as a restaurant was catered on fine dining and tablecloth service with a high touch, well, people aren't dining, and many municipalities have actually reduced the number of customers that you can have. And certainly, if you're operating in a geographic area of the country where winter weather is really brutal, then you're going to have trouble being able to sustain yourself with customers who don't want to come in, or you can't seat them outside. On the other hand, if you're running a restaurant that always had, a strong delivery takeout business, then you could do pretty well. One of my specialties that I had really began to be known as an industry expert was for companies who are in the corporate apartments or corporate travel space. These are companies that rent apartments to folks who are traveling for a new job and on extended stay, and don't stay in hotels. Well, that business is just really evaporated. And I've had multiple clients who had at the beginning of the year committed to sell, who now are faced with the prospect of not being able uh, to sell. So, in a nutshell, it's all across the board. I can't really characterize and say that there's one sector in particular, but there's some obvious sectors that are hurting, as I said, like travel, leisure time, restaurants, businesses are hurting.
Yeah, and my next question for you then is, um, well, I have two questions. So the first one is, with the businesses that are hurting, is it a good time to maybe go in and
Yeah.
scoop up some of those deals
Yes. Yeah.
because, you
Yeah.
know, they're hurting and you
Yeah.
probably could get them for a steal.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So, um, in my sector that I just talked about, the corporate housing sector, even though it's a down market, there's different tiers in terms of size of players in the market. So the smaller players in the market are suffering more. The bigger players have deeper pockets or have stronger balance sheets. So they're actually looking at this as a buying opportunity. They're selectively looking one level down in terms of the next company size and looking at buying market share. So if there was a new city that they had on their radar to expand into, rather than 3 years from now have a plan to go in and start up operations from scratch, they're accelerating their investment in those markets and saying, well, now's a good time for me to be able to buy into those markets. So smart companies, and I've had inquiries from companies, are looking at this as an opportunity to buy market share.
Mhm.
Share. Now, you can't go in as from a pure mercenary perspective and say, I'm just going to just basically take your business and take advantage of the situation. Um, I have one client, and I won't say what the sector was. I had a deal that fell apart in early March because of COVID. Uh, a buyer that was previously interested uh, and had fallen through 3 weeks prior came back to the table with a lowball offer that so pissed off my client till he said that he didn't ever want to hear from her again.
Mhm.
So, uh, you know, and he's decided, he said, look, I'll just find a way to make it through this period, and I'm going to come back to the market after I get through it. So yes, if you're a smart buyer and if you come in with a reasonable offer that offers a seller some type of future compensation should the business rebound, those are the type of offers that I think would get a serious consideration from buyers who have, sorry, from sellers who have decided that now might be a good time to cash out.
Right. So then that leads me to my next question is the no money down offers. We hear it,
Yeah, yeah,
especially as our people, we're trying to figure out how we can get in with no money down, et cetera, et cetera. And I know you have strong feelings about that.
good question. So what I neglected to do before the call today, and I'm a bad guess in this regard, September 30th, the SBA had a COVID related incentive for people who they were targeting people to take out business loans, particularly for acquisitions. So the SBA, the 7A program, was running this special that started back in March, that if you wanted to buy a business, the SBA would pay 6 months worth of your principal and interest themselves.
I didn't
So
even know about that, and I consider
yeah,
myself in the know.
yeah, and so I know it expired September 30th, but I get a feeling that they probably are going to renew that program. So, all right, stay with me for a minute now. So, the typical business valuation in this country for a transaction under 2 million, it could be a restaurant, it could be tire repair, just in general, this is a real generalization, is going to sell for 2 to 2.5 times seller's discretionary earnings. That's owner's take home plus net profits. It's the simplest way. Plus, you add back depreciation and any kind of non cash expenses, and you get to what's called seller's discretionary earnings. So, the typical business under $2.5 million will sell from 2 to 2.5 times that annual number. So, if the SBA is going to pay 6 months, and by the way, 2 to 2.5 times earnings means basically 2.5 years times earning, so 2.5 times annual earnings. So the SBA was willing to pay 6 months, so they were willing to pay that 0.5, half a year of a transaction. So if you bought a company that was valued at $1 million the SBA would pay 20%
Yeah,
of that,
200 grand.
would pay 200 grand of that. Okay.
Wow.
Now stay with me here. Okay. So the SBA is going to pay 20% of that. On typical, it's not unusual for owners who are selling businesses in this size range to be asked to hold what's called a seller's note to finance a part of the transaction. And typically, you will see owners hold a note for 20 to 30% of the transaction price. So if you could get an owner to offer a seller's note in that same $1 million business to put up 20% or 30% in a note, all of a sudden that's, you add the SBA program of 200,000, another 200 to 300,000, $500,000 of that purchase price gets counted as equity when you go to look for financing. So when you go to a bank, you can say SBA is putting in 20% equity. The seller is going to offer me seller financing, which gets counted as equity. So all of a sudden, you can buy $1 million business. You have $500,000 in equity. The SBA money is free money. The owner's note that you eventually have to pay back, fair enough, but it gets counted as equity toward the transaction. So if you go to a bank with that sort of deal, you wouldn't have to put any cash into the deal because you basically have 50% of the purchase price already covered by equity.
I told y'all he was awesome. I didn't even know about this. Oh,
So
wow.
again, that the SBA portion of that program, I know expired September 30th when the government fiscal year ended. I am unsure if that got renewed or not. I had intended to go and check. It's the 7A program. I don't know if it's still out there, but I wouldn't be surprised that after the election, that's something that gets revived.
I
So.
agree with that as well. And I will say another thing, love him or hate him, both Trump and Biden in a lesser extent, but definitely Trump is trying to do things to cater to Black people. There are a lot of companies out there that are putting a lot of money into Black entrepreneurs and Black investments as well. And I think it's up to us to be a part of something like the 10K project, get information from Russell and other people that we have on and say, okay, how can we collectively come together and figure out how to apply this stuff?
So one other point that I want to make, Cherie, is that from a demographic perspective of the United States, the baby boom generation has now reached retirement age.
Yes.
A lot of baby boomers who wanted to retire in the 2008 to 2016 time frame when they were reaching retirement age but couldn't because of the economic downturn at that period, are now, we're now heading for the exit. So there was a glut of really quality businesses that were coming on the market. And so when there's a glut of businesses coming on the market, you got, as a buyer, you have more to choose from. You're going to find more deals and you're going to be able to get better terms. So now with COVID, it really has switched to where it's now a buyer's market, to be honest. And now is a good time. Banks are motivated as well to lend. So if you have business experience, if you are targeting a business that is down because of COVID, but has a good track record pre-COVID, then there's a pretty good chance that you can get financing for a deal right now.
Wow. And I will say this, even if you don't have entrepreneurial experience, I literally just got off the phone with a client of mine who doesn't necessarily have experience in a specific sector, but she's bringing on a CEO, a startup CEO for her business that specifically has the qualifications in the sector. And I'm going to be talking with her, her investor, I think the latter part of next week, in order to sell him on it. But I'm like, it's an easy sell. This guy knows how to take this company from here to here. Therefore, that's what we're going to be using your money for.
That's Cherie, and that's a good point. But also, again, in this marketplace, most sellers, at least the sellers that I deal with, I let them know that there is a greater chance that they will be able to sell their businesses in a timely fashion for the multiple that they want if they're willing to stay on in a transitional advisory capacity until you come up to speed. So as a prospective buyer for a business, it's a good idea if you don't have the type of experience that you think you ought to have in that sector. It's not unreasonable to work out a deal where the seller will stay involved for some period of time after the transaction.
So let's talk about a couple of more things on the buy side, and then we'll move to the sell side. And I want to say that this conversation is awesome. We could probably talk to Russell for another 2 hours and still not get all our questions answered. But I want to ask two more specific questions, at least about the buying side. No, I got three questions. Okay. Number one is, should you buy something that you know? Should you buy in an industry that you know? Or have you seen success stories where people get into a completely new industry that they have not been exposed to before and still make it?
Yes and yes is the answer. So clearly, if you buy something in an industry where you have familiarity and you have operated or had a job and employment in that sector, that's obviously a strength. However, if it's a sector that's having external challenges, you could be the greatest, most knowledgeable person in that industry, but if the industry is really suffering, then you may need to think whether or not it makes sense to buy in your existing sector. So I'll say that. And banks do typically look favorably upon someone buying a business from an industry that they have experience with. So that's why I said yes.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have experience, and Cherie and I just briefly touched on some ways to bridge that experience gap if you buy outside of your domain knowledge. If you buy a business that is an attractive business, and by that, typically I think the most attractive businesses are businesses that have either recurring revenue or recurring income streams, or have customers who are long-term customers or sticky, that are, if they have high customer retention, if they have a diversified customer base. There are some characteristics of really strong and valuable businesses that you can buy that will give you a greater odds of being successful than a business that doesn't have those characteristics. Now, be aware that you're going to tend to have to pay a premium for those types of businesses, because everyone wants a business like that, that's got recurring revenue, long-term customers, diversified customer base, Yelp ratings of 4.0, been in business 35 years, seasoned management team. Those businesses are in high demand. But if you're willing to pay for them, those are really good types of businesses that you can acquire, even if you don't really know the industry, but have good management skills.
Yeah. So my second to last question about the buy side is, what are some of the top mistakes that you see people make when they come into your office and say, I want to buy a business, or they're going through the process?
Good question. So one is they really haven't done a sort of a personal inventory of of their motivations. In other words, why do I want to buy a business? What is it that I am looking for personally and professionally? Am I the type of person that wants to work 60 hours a week, or do I want something that's more of an absentee ownership type of situation? That's one mistake. So not really knowing what your personal and professional goals are. Closely related to that, there's literally millions of businesses out there in the U.S. today, and so doing some homework on the types of business industries or sectors that you're interested in buying. So in other words, not having any kind of idea about the type of business you want to buy. And what that means is that they wind up spinning their wheels, wasting a lot of time and money, looking for deals and not really moving forward. And then the third mistake that I see most common once they've done the first two things right and have found a business is getting emotionally tied to a deal and overpaying. You can't get emotional when it comes to deal making. You have to be as objective as possible and set aside, your personal feelings about I've got to get this deal done, because once you become emotionally involved with the deal itself, then you lose your objectivity and the ability to walk away from a bad deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that emotional thing is so important because I was writing a business plan for this couple who wanted to purchase in, the restaurant industry. And they got very emotionally tied to this one specific restaurant. Yet when we started looking at the financials, so I was able to actually like forecast. I'm like, you all know what you would need to do in order to get this restaurant up to profitability. And the seller didn't want to come down on the price. They had their price as what it was. And, you know, um, I guess sometimes you have to be careful of how um, much you get wrapped into the seller's story and the emotion that they put into it and trying to get you to, want to purchase it. Just like somebody tries to get you to pay more for a house
Yes.
than it's worth, or than it would appraise for. So, the final question that I have for you on the buy side is about the financials. So looping that in, what are some of the things so typically when you're about to buy a business, you look at the financials. What are some of the things that protects a purchaser from getting falsified financials, getting financials that are incorrect, and all of that?
Good question. So, a couple of answers to this, and I don't want to get too technical, but generically speaking, there's two ways or two different ways to structure a deal. One is an asset purchase, and the other is a stock purchase. In an asset purchase, you are just purchasing the tangible and intangible assets of a business. So inventory, vehicles, furniture and fixtures, um, customer lists would be intangibles.
Yeah, the customer list is huge.
Yeah, knowledge and goodwill, recipes, for example, if you were buying a restaurant, are intangibles, business name, phone number, and go down the list.
Mhm.
In that circumstance, you don't have any risk of the liabilities of a company. So, say that there was an employee who had a legal dispute with the previous owners. Well, in an asset sale, you're buying the assets of that business, even if it's in the same location, but you are not subject to some of the past sins of the previous owner. However, if you structured that deal as a stock deal, and there's some tax benefits and other benefits to choosing one versus the other. So in a stock deal, for example, you're purchasing the entity, the legal business entity from that person. Then you are potentially beholden to some of the past sins and risks of the previous ownership. So that's a drawback in that regard. So those are some of the structural differences that can help mitigate some of the risks of getting into a bad deal or some fraud. Now, that still doesn't answer the question about the books and the financials. So, one of the things that I do before I will take on a sell side client, the question that I always 100% of the time ask my prospective client is, tell me who your accounting firm is and how long you have had that accounting firm. If it's someone who's changing accounting firms every other year or so, that's a red flag to me. So I look for firms that are selling who have a good, strong accounting firm and have been with that firm for a long time. That gives me one sense that that the company is being managed, or at least is having someone who's overlooking their financials in a professional manner. But even that is not enough. And so when you go into the deal, you have to make sure that the deal purchase agreement, you have reps and warranties in there that protect from any sort of fraudulent information that you were given in the transaction. And if you get bank financing, your banker will make sure that your purchase agreement has those reps and warranties. But long story short is that you should have an independent accountant that's working with you to overlook the financials, and you should do some due diligence on the accounting firm that the seller is using to make sure it's a reputable accounting firm if you can. So.
Perfect. So if people have questions, specific questions, please put them in. I am in Facebook and I'm also here on Zoom, so I can see both places here. If you are looking at a specific industry, bring it up so that we can ask Russell. So let's flip now to the selling side of things. And like I said, oh gosh, I want to say probably about 6, 7 years ago, I was speaking with a woman black woman, turns out, who had sold 2 different businesses. And her whole thing was from the second business, she was able to retire. And, she was in her, I think by that time, late 40s, and she was able to retire because she had set the business up to sell. And I started getting interested in the sell side, like how she was able to do it, because I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is something that I would want to consider. Um, there's a large percentage of businesses out there that are not saleable, that that cannot sell for the amount that that the seller would need in order to take care of all of the debts and have a comfortable retirement, etc. Do you know the numbers offhand in terms of the percentage of businesses that are not exit ready?
Great question. So I can give you a pretty close approximation. So the one of the main sources that you would go to and look for a business to buy that's currently on the market is Biz buy BUY sell SELL.com. 90% of the businesses that are listed on Biz Buy Sell, so a proxy for the businesses that are on the market to sell, 90% of them will never sell. So roughly, I would say 80 to 90% of the businesses that are out there will not sell.
Mhm.
And that's because the owners have not paid attention to transaction readiness and pre-sale prep. And the things that you need to do are the things that I always screen for when I'm talking to a sell side client. It goes back to what I just talked about with respect to your financials and your accounting firm. If you don't have an accounting firm, you got to get one if you're thinking about selling. If your books are not well kept, you got to get your books in order. Typically, there's a minimum of a 3-year look back period that a prospective buyer is going to be looking at in terms of track record before they will pull the trigger. And similarly for banks. And by the way, banks don't necessarily have to be the only source of funding, but they are a typical source of funding for small business transactions. And let's face it, in our community, we just don't have the equity and the wealth to go and borrow from friends and family to fund transactions. But anyway,
Incentive project.
yes, yes,
Put that in there.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Um,
So, a 3-year look back period is necessary. So, if you're a business owner and you haven't done those pre-transaction readiness, like get your financials in order, uh, build a second line management team. In other words, you need someone who can mind the shop if you get sick or want to go on vacation or have an emergency. Um, if you don't have your key employees, if you don't pay attention to
Operations
employees, yeah,
manual.
yeah, operations manual, processes and procedures. Those
Mhm.
are all the things that enhance the value of the business. And as I say, if you don't have them in place today, I'm going to butcher this saying. The best time to have done that was 3 years ago, and the
Mhm.
second best time to do that is today.
Now.
So,
Mhm.
because again, you've got this 3-year look back period that people are going to be looking for.
Right. And, I think two things are very important. So, number one is that you want to be part of the 10%. And really, you want to be the top 10% of the 10%, right?
Yes.
Of businesses that are available for sale. So that way you can maximize your your return on investment or your exit, right? The second thing that's so important is this is not like selling a house. So many of us are familiar with selling a house. Like, oh, you know what? I want to sell a house. I'm going to call the contractor and have them slap on some paint. I might call the handyman and have them spackle the walls. I'm going to get somebody to mow the lawn, and voila, house can be ready for sale in 6 weeks. Like, no. So one of the things when I had started learning about selling businesses, because it was something I was thinking about doing at one point, buying and selling businesses privately, was how few people actually have a saleable business and how long it takes to create a business that is saleable. You really do have to have a long-term view. So even if you're thinking, I want to sell in 10 years, like I'm 45 right now, I want to sell in 10 years at 55, I want to sell for X amount of dollars, and I want to be able to take that money and live off the interest. I literally had this in my head, right? I want to sell for $30 million and I want to, like, after taxes, right? And I want to live off the interest. That was my whole grand scheme plan, right? You have to start, like Russell said, today, thinking about that. What kind of business are you going to be in? How much you need to make in revenues? How much you need to make in net profits? Who could potentially buy a business for $30 million? Like that was my evil genius plan. But I do think that people need to be aware of that, Russell, and
Yeah.
really have that
Yeah,
mindset.
Cherie, yeah, and I'm gonna offer a shameless plug
Please,
uh,
please.
for I have a book and video series that I did called Owner's Playbook
Mhm.
that teaches business owners how to sell their business themselves if they wish to do it and not have to pay for an advisor like myself.
Mhm.
And in my book, I have a chapter on sellability readiness, and it's a self assessment that you can walk through that will tell you your ability to execute a sale of your business and how attractive it is right now. And in that, I actually have a checklist that if you want to sell in 1 year, here are the minimum things that you need to have in place. If your time horizon is 2 years, here are the things that you need to have in place. And if it's 3 to 5 years or longer, here are the things that you need to have in place in terms of readiness to sell. So
Mhm.
Cherie is absolutely right that you can't, just go out and decide that, like a house, I'm going to slap some paint on it and sell it tomorrow. No, you can't
Yeah.
do that. So
Yeah. And I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, our whole point is to buy low and sell high, right? Our whole point as investors is to buy low and sell high. So these are the types of things we need to think about from the business world. And if we're able, as a group, as a community, and as a people, to find these gems that we can buy low, and then be able to turn them around in 3 to 5 years and sell them for triple the market premium, to investors that have the type of dollars, that's really a business for some people that are in.
Right.
We had a gentleman come a couple of weeks ago who is an operations manual creator. That's his whole thing, is how to operationalize the business. I have a couple of other people that I know that do the same thing. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there for people. If if you're interested in something like that, to definitely take Russell up. How do people get their hands on that assessment and your course?
Again, the website is called Owners, OWNERS, playbook.com. And everything's right there on the site. I offer a workbook that has the checklist that I just talked about. There's a 7-module video course that you can sign up for and take to help you. And I also offer virtual coaching. So typically, when I am hired by a company that wants to sell their business, there's 2 parts to my compensation. There's a monthly retainer that they have to pay, and then there's a success fee when the transaction is done. So again, if you have a business that you're interested in selling yourself uh, and want to save some money, and you have the time and you believe you have the skill, my course on Owner's Playbook will give you that ability to sell it yourself, and you wouldn't have to pay someone like me.
Right, right. I mean, I really just like the readiness aspect of it as well. It's kind of like, if
Yeah,
I want, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Cherie. I mean, in that readiness checklist, we go through, as I said, whether you're selling immediately, selling in 2 years or 3+ years. What are the specific things you need to do from a growth perspective? Uh, what do you need to do with your management team if you're selling now or selling in 5 years? How about customers? For example, if you want to sell immediately, if you have customer contracts, all your customer contracts in a single place,
Mhm.
because that's what people are going to look for in due diligence. Uh, let's see, processes and operations. Have you, do you have performance metrics for your business? Are they written down? What are the processes? Do you have an operational manual? What are some of the redundancies in your business that you can eliminate before a sale? Financial management. Do you have 3 years of financials? Do you have an accounting system that can produce interim financials?
Mhm.
Uh, are you holding quarterly meetings with your CPA to review your business performance? Do you have a respected CPA? Are your financials cleaned up? So again, it's a very systematic model, a systematic list that we have that will really help you think about the things you need to do given your time horizon regarding when you would like to exit.
Right. And, a great operations manager for some of us could take a lot of that on, a lot of that checklist on, and set the pieces up so that if you're really good at providing services for the client, so you're really good at the marketing and sales, you don't necessarily have to do everything yourself
Right,
in a
right,
business. You don't even have to tell the operations manager, I plan on selling this business in 3 years, therefore I need you to. No, you just, hey, I'm hiring somebody so that I can get our business operations really together, really on point. And this is the list, that I need the person to do. And again, the whole point is for us to be at the top 10% of the top 10% of businesses that are for sale, so that we could sell for an extra premium.
yeah. And
You know,
Cherie,
for
those
our
what you're describing are the types of clients that I actually look for in sugar. So a lot of M&A firms or business brokers take on 20 clients at once.
Mhm.
My business model, I only tend to work with 3 to 5 clients simultaneously, but I spend a lot more time upfront prospecting and vetting businesses before I take them on as a client, because I know the types of businesses that are most in demand that people want to buy. And
Mhm.
if I am representing those types of businesses, it's much easier for me to be successful as an M&A advisor. So
Mhm.
there's no magic per se in terms of what I do. I'm just very judicious and selective in the types of businesses that I represent for sale. And then I get a reputation of having good businesses for sale. So it perpetuates itself.
So Eric is asking for the website again. So it's Owner's Handbook, right?
No, playbook.
Ownersplaybook.com.
Yes.
Ownersplaybook.com. So Eric, we just put it in there for you, and I'm also going to put it in Zoom here, ownersplaybook.com, so that everybody is able to get their hands on that. So with that, are there any final words that you have for the family with regards to buying
Yes.
and selling businesses?
Yeah. Listen, I myself bought one of my clients' businesses. When I got into this business as an M&A advisor, I had some of the specific craft skills in my toolkit. I knew how to value businesses. I knew how to read financials. I had strong skills in terms of marketing. Those were all really good craft skills that you need to look for in an M&A advisor. But at the end of the day, I felt like one of the side benefits of being an M&A advisor is that I would see attractive opportunities that I would want to put money into myself.
Mhm.
So there was a client that I had who owned an auto supply replenishment business, auto shop supply replenishment business. I talked to him and his wife for 5 years before they were ready to sell their business. I knew that business in and out. And when it got time for them to retire and look at moving on, he came to me and said, look, you've been here for the past 5 years. I want you to sell. Well, just like he had comfort with me, I had comfort with his business. And I knew there were opportunities to automate some of the manual processes he had in the business, and that there was a lot more value that I could unlock. So my skill set was from being a consultant and an engineer. I knew I could automate that business and unlock value. So I bought that business myself. Other people may be stronger to start a business from scratch.
Mhm.
That wasn't my strength. So I strongly recommend looking at buying a business if you don't feel like that you're a startup type of person. As Cherie mentioned, there's money out there to do it. There's expertise to help hold your hand to help you do it. And if you've got a good professional career, banks will lend. Banks will lend. It's just going to the right person. And again, making sure that you avoid some of the pitfalls that I talked about earlier in making a bad acquisition, then it's a very viable approach to building wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody, it's ownersplaybook.com where you're able to go and get that assessment and also learn the art and science of buying a business, of selling a business. This was I still go back to that SBA loan thing. I'm like, y'all know my saying, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Obviously, I didn't know the right people. Otherwise, I would have known about that program.
Yeah,
So I need to step up my game.
Cherie, I'm in the industry and I didn't learn about it until it was early August when
Mhm.
I found out that the SBA was doing that. And I started immediately looking around for deals for myself that I could do. And I just didn't have enough time to
Yeah.
pull it out. But please, by all means, it's the SBA 7A program. And it was the specific loan program and the specific deal around it. They announced it on their website. So keep your eyes open for that again.
You just have to keep your eyes open, and that's a part of like coming to places like here as well and getting on all sorts of webinars and things like that. You never know what you're going to hear. You never ever know. So with that, thank you, Russell. I
Cherie,
especially
thank you so
virtual
much.
hand clap.
Thank you. Thank you. Thrilled to have done it. So
Yes. All righty, everybody. And people are saying thank you in Facebook as well. So hope you have a great weekend. And don't forget the Family Wealth Challenge starts on Monday. So Monday at 6 p.m., we are going to officially launch the Family Wealth Challenge. You will want to be in the building. Take care, everybody. Have a good weekend.
bye.